Have you ever had one of those days when everything seems to go wrong from the moment you wake up? You open your eyes with a strange feeling in your chest, and gradually everything around you seems to conspire to confirm that something is off. The coffee spills, the message you were waiting for doesn't arrive, the simplest conversation turns into tension, and without realizing it, your mind starts to search and find even more signs that the day is lost. But what if reality wasn't reacting against you? What if it were merely reflecting the exact place where your attention settled? There's a question that few dare to face deeply. Is the chaos we experience real on its own, or merely a reflection of what we choose to focus on? The way you observe the world might actually be shaping the world you live in, not as a feel-good theory of self-help, but as an invisible mechanism, silent and powerful, that operates constantly without most people realizing it. The human mind is not just a receiver of reality, it is a lens. And like every lens, it distorts, amplifies, colors. The focus you maintain, consciously or not, creates the filters through which everything is interpreted. And the most subtle part of it all? That focus doesn't just interpret, it collapses possibilities. It selects what you will experience. In other words, your attention is a creative act. Today, you're going to discover why your reality may not be what it is, but rather what you're seeing, and even more, how changing the way you observe may be the key to finally breaking the cycle. The science behind focus, how attention shapes perception. Have you ever wondered why, when you think of something specific, like a new car, a number, or even a color, it starts appearing everywhere? It seems like magic, but it's actually science. There's a silent mechanism in your brain called the reticular activating system, or simply RAS, which acts like a neurological gatekeeper. Every second, it decides what deserves to enter your consciousness and what can be ignored. After all, amidst billions of daily stimuli, processing everything would be unsustainable. So the brain filters. But this filter isn't neutral. It is shaped by your beliefs, your fears, and most of all, your focus. The RAS works like a selective lens. Imagine your mind as a dark room, and the RAS is a flashlight. It illuminates only what you've already determined, consciously or unconsciously, to be relevant. And the rest simply disappears from your active perception. If you're focused on scarcity, the RAS filters reality to show everything that confirms that narrative. If you're obsessed with control, it will highlight everything that seems out of place, fueling the anxiety that nothing is safe. And even if there is abundance or harmony around you, you won't see it. Not because it doesn't exist, but because focus blinds. This system is amplified by another subtle yet devastating phenomenon: confirmation bias. The brain loves to be right. It relentlessly seeks evidence that its current view of the world is true, even if that view is sabotaging you. If you believe, for instance, that no one values me, your attention will begin to highlight every act of neglect, every silence, every absence as proof that you're right. Meanwhile, all the affection you receive is filtered, or worse, dismissed. This combination between the RAS and confirmation bias creates a closed perceptual loop. You focus on something, the brain filters the world to confirm it, you reinforce your belief, and the cycle starts again. Gradually, the external reality starts to look like a mirror of your mind. And in a way, it is. This is not poetic metaphor. We're talking about a brain mechanism that literally selects the reality you perceive. And that has profound implications. If your attention is locked into a narrative of fear, lack, rejection, or failure, it's as if your mind is programmed to keep you inside that bubble, not out of malice, but out of habit, out of self-protection. The brain prefers repeating the known rather than risking the unknown. And that's exactly why so many people feel stuck in their own lives, even while doing everything they can to change. Because changing your life starts with changing your focus. And changing your focus requires looking at what you never wanted to see. Consider this. Two people can go through the same situation in the same place at the same time and walk away with completely different feelings. One sees threat, the other sees opportunity, One sees an insurmountable obstacle, the other an invitation to grow. The difference isn't in the facts, it's in the lens, in the focus, in what each person was trained or conditioned to notice, and above all, in what each one decided to feed with their attention. The good news is that this lens can be adjusted, not with forced effort, nor with shallow, positive thinking, but with awareness. When you realize your attention is like a selective lens, you gain the key to transforming the quality of your experience. It's not about thinking positive, but rather asking, what has my attention been reinforcing? What kind of reality am I feeding with my quietest thoughts? Attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess, more than time, because where your attention goes, your energy follows. And where your energy settles, life responds. That's why it's not enough to want to change. You need to observe where the gaze is coming from. What's guiding your perception right now? An old trauma? An inherited fear? A legitimate desire or an unconscious escape? The answer to that determines not just what you perceive, but what you experience. This is where science meets spirituality. The brain as a biological structure responds to patterns, but the consciousness that observes those patterns, that can choose differently. When you begin to observe the way you observe, something profound happens. Focus becomes free. Reality stops being an automatic repetition and becomes a conscious creation. But what if this creation isn't just internal? What if the simple act of observing has the power not just to filter reality, but to shape it at its core? In the next section, we'll cross the point where quantum physics meets consciousness and reveal why the observer doesn't just see the world, they collapse it. The observer effect. Quantum physics meets consciousness. There is an experiment in physics that forever changed the way we understand reality, the double-slit experiment. Simple at first glance, it revealed something so profound that it still challenges our linear logic to this day. In it, subatomic particles, like electrons, are fired at a surface with two slits. When unobserved, they behave like waves, creating interference patterns. But when they are observed, something unbelievable happens. They collapse into particles. The simple act of looking changes the behavior of matter. This is the essence of the so-called observer effect. And what it tells us is, at the very least, unsettling. Reality, at its most fundamental level, responds to observation, not as a symbolic consequence, but as a direct reaction. This means that the quantum universe is not just out there, functioning independently. It organizes or disorganizes in response to the gaze that observes it. Traditional physics, which taught us to see the world as an objective mechanism, begins to crumble in the face of this realization. The boundary between subject and object dissolves. The observer and the observed are no longer two. They become parts of the same field in constant interaction. And if that's true at the quantum level, what does it say about how we live, feel, and perceive our experiences? Imagine for a moment that your attention, what you offer as conscious presence, is the equivalent of the light in the experiment. While you don't observe, possibilities remain open. But when you direct your consciousness toward one of them, it collapses and manifests. Your reality, then, is not a fixed path. It's a field of potentiality, and what you choose to focus on collapses that field into a concrete experience. This is where spirituality finds support, because what mystics have always said, that reality is a reflection of consciousness, is now backed by scientific evidence. The observer is not a passive spectator of existence. They are a co-creator, an agent who, by perceiving, gives shape. And you don't need to understand formulas or diagrams to experience this. Just notice the impact your gaze has on everything it touches. How many times has a problem grown just because you poured all your energy into it? And how many times has a possibility blossomed at the exact moment you saw it with faith and presence? The issue isn't magic, it's resonance. Reality vibrates in response to the quality of your observation. And when that observation is tainted by fear, judgment, or haste. What collapses is not lightness, it's density. In the quantum field, everything exists in a state of superposition until someone observes. In your life, everything is available in potential until your mind decides what is real. And that decision, though it may seem rational, is deeply emotional. You don't see what is. You see what you're prepared to see, what you expect to see, what you've learned to see, and often what you fear to see. But there's something even more subtle here. Because if observation collapses reality, then the way you observe yourself is also shaping your identity. Your internal judgments, your silent criticisms, your recurring thoughts are all acting as observers of your own being. And in doing so, reinforcing old versions of yourself, even when you wish to break free from them. That's why so many attempts at change fail. Because behind the desire for transformation, there's still an observation rooted in the old self, in trauma, in guilt, in doubt. You try to change, but you still observe yourself as someone who needs fixing. And so what collapses is more of what you don't want. The gaze, even subtle, is creative, and everything you look at with resistance persists. The key is to change the place from which you observe. Instead of looking from the wound, look from presence. Instead of observing life with judgment, observe with curiosity. This internal shift, from criticism to awareness, changes the vibration of the observation, and with it, the collapse changes. Reality responds differently because you're vibrating differently. The consciousness that observes is the only variable you can truly choose. And by making that choice, you stop being a hostage to reality and become its architect. This is the true power of focus, not just selecting what to see, but choosing the level of consciousness from which you see, from fear or from presence, from lack or from gratitude, from the past or from the now. But if everything depends on how we observe, what defines that gaze? Why are some people able to maintain focus on what uplifts, while others can only see what hurts? The answer isn't out there, it's inside. In the invisible filters we accumulate throughout life, in the conditioning that defines what we consider normal, in the traumas that still shape our interpretations. In the next section, we'll walk through these silent filters and understand how the mind, in trying to protect us, may be projecting a reality we no longer need to live. Psychological lenses, the filters of our mind. You don't see the world as it is, you see the world as you are. This sentence may sound enigmatic, but it reveals a subtle mechanism that governs our daily experience, the way we filter reality. From a very early age, our mind begins to organize the world into patterns. It interprets, generalizes, creates shortcuts. All of this with a single goal, to protect us. But over time, these filters stop being tools and become barriers. They don't just organize reality, they distort it. Imagine your mind as a pair of glasses with lenses that have been tinted throughout your life. By what you heard in childhood, by the experiences that left a mark on you, by the fears you couldn't process. Every judgment you received, every absence that hurt, every criticism that froze you, all of it became a silent code. A code that says, it's not safe to trust, you need to strive to be loved. The world is dangerous, people will always abandon you. And this unconscious code is exactly what dictates where your attention goes. These mental filters, also known as reality tunnels, function like internal pathways. They determine what you notice, what you ignore, what affects you, and what you don't even perceive. The same look, the same gesture can be seen as affection by one person and as a threat by another. Not because the fact itself is different, but because the filters are. And the most challenging part? These tunnels are invisible. You don't realize you're inside one. To you, that filter is the world itself. You think you're seeing reality, but in truth, you're only seeing the reality possible within your emotional programming. An unhealed trauma, for example, can make every silence feel like rejection. A scarcity belief can turn every expense into a threat. A memory of abandonment can turn every change into imminent loss. And the more you live inside that tunnel, the more it reinforces itself. Because the brain, as we've seen, seeks to confirm what it already knows. It doesn't want to confront you with the new. It wants to keep you safe, even if that means repeating patterns that hurt you. And that's how incredible people, conscious and full of desire to change, remain trapped in the same pains. Not for lack of effort, but because they're trying to escape a maze without realizing the walls are inside. The question that needs to be asked is not, why does this keep happening to me? But rather, what is the filter through which I keep seeing all of this? What am I still projecting onto the world and onto myself without realizing it? Where does this lens come from that makes everything seem difficult, threatening, scarce? And here's the major turning point. When you realize that you are looking through something, the possibility arises to look at that something. That is, to observe the filter, to become aware of the tunnel, to become, for the first time, greater than the narrative itself. And that awareness changes everything, because instead of reacting automatically, you begin to choose, to respond, to redirect. But this process is not mental, it is experiential. It begins the moment you stop and observe. In the silence between one thought and the next, in the space between the trigger and the reaction. It's in that gap that freedom is born. If up until now this content has brought clarity about a filter you didn't even know you were carrying, leave a comment now. I'm starting to see beyond my pattern. This is not just a phrase, it's a statement of awareness, a subtle break in the cycle. And if this video has been helpful, remember to like it now, not only to support the channel, but to internally seal this moment of expansion. Because in the next step of this journey, we'll go deeper into this space of presence, this sacred interval between stimulus and response. We'll explore the power of mindfulness and discover how the practice of conscious observation can free you from the automatic patterns that repeat your story. The power of mindfulness, redirecting focus intentionally. There is a quiet point within you, a place where everything slows down, where thought loses its grip and reality reveals itself effortlessly. This point is not a concept, it's an experience, and it can only be accessed when the mind stops chasing things and begins to simply observe. This point is what many call presence, and cultivating this presence, this state of full awareness, is the art of mindfulness. The word may sound modern, even therapeutic, but its root is ancient. Ancient cultures have long spoken about the power of being fully in the now, of escaping the illusion of the past and the fear of the future, and returning to the only moment where life truly happens. This one, here. Now, mindfulness is not positive thinking. It's not about controlling thoughts, and it's definitely not another task for the anxious mind to try to accomplish. It's the opposite. It's the conscious surrender to the present moment. It's the simple and revolutionary act of noticing. Where is my attention right now? Maybe it's on what someone said yesterday. Maybe it's on the fear of what might happen tomorrow. Maybe it's caught up in 1,000 mental narratives about what you should be feeling, doing, or being. But when you pull your attention back to your body, to your breath, to the sensation of air entering and leaving, something starts to shift. Not because the outside world changes, but because you change the point of contact with it. Mindful awareness is the connecting thread between focus and freedom. Because while your attention is being dominated by the automatic impulses of the conditioned brain, you will live in reaction. Reaction to fear, to habit, to guilt. But when attention becomes conscious, it becomes choice. You stop being dragged by the current of thoughts and begin to navigate the river by decision. Simple practices can open this space. Observing the air touching your nostrils, feeling your feet on the ground, noticing the sounds around you without labeling them, mentally naming what you're feeling without trying to fix anything. This may not seem like transformation at first glance, but it is, because every time you choose to return, you are training your nervous system to leave urgency and inhabit presence. And little by little, perception changes. What was once invisible starts to be noticed. Emotional triggers lose strength. Unconscious repetitions become conscious. And the most beautiful part, focus, that same focus that used to feed chaos, begins to feed silence, clarity, realignment. You start to notice thoughts coming, but no longer identify with them. You begin to feel emotions rising, but don't sink into them. There's a pause, and in that pause, there is freedom. This is not escape, much less passivity. It is the highest form of responsibility, to consciously choose where your energy will be placed. Because where attention goes, reality organizes. When you focus on what's missing, the whole world seems to confirm it. But when you focus with presence on what exists now, the field around you begins to respond with a new frequency. And maybe you've already realized, many times it's not the problem that needs to be solved. It's the way you're observing it that needs to be dissolved. The tension isn't only in the situation, it's in the body that hasn't been heard, in the mind that hasn't slowed down, in the heart that hasn't been embraced. And all of that can start to change when you simply decide to be in the now, to breathe without interference, to observe without judgment, to perceive without getting lost. This state is not permanent, and it doesn't need to be. It is cultivated, like a trail being opened through the forest. The more you walk it, the clearer it becomes, and every small practice matters. Not because of what it changes on the outside, but because of what it unlocks on the inside. When you learn to direct your focus with intention and no longer by impulse, the world stops being an automatic reflection of your pain and becomes a mirror of your presence. And the most profound part of all this is that in this process, something begins to emerge. Something subtler than thought, more stable than emotion, truer than the identity you've grown used to living in. It is a perception that watches yourself thinking, a silent point that doesn't identify with fear or the past or guilt. It is your real center, that which has always been there, but was hidden by the noisy mind. A consciousness that doesn't react. It simply sees, and by seeing, it sets you free. This is the next step of our journey. We will now enter this silent consciousness that lives behind your thoughts and discover how to live from the inner observer, no longer from the conditioned character. Because it is from this place that reality ceases to be survival and becomes creation. Spiritual perspectives, the witness consciousness. There is something within you that has never been wounded, something that has always been there, even before any pain, before any name, before any identity. A point of silence that simply observes, without judging, without clinging, without getting lost. This is what many traditions call the witness, or witness consciousness. In Hindu philosophy, it is called Sakshi, and at the center of this view lies a key. You are not your thoughts, not your emotions, not even your stories. You are the one who observes all of it unfold. This is not just a beautiful idea. It is a radical shift in the way you relate to yourself and to reality. Because most of us live imprisoned in layers. Layers of interpretation, of the past, of beliefs, of inherited fears. When something happens, we don't react to what is in front of us. We react to what it means through the lenses we carry. And this reaction is almost always automatic, unconscious, repetitive. Suffering, then, doesn't come from the fact, but from the attachment to the character interpreting the fact. The witness consciousness is the space between the fact and the interpretation. It is the place where time slows down, where the I that suffers is no longer the center of the scene, but an observed event. When you access this dimension, you realize there is an I behind the I, a presence that sees fear without being overtaken by it, that notices the critical thought without believing in it, that feels the emotion rise but does not merge with it. This does not mean numbness. It does not mean denial. It means freedom, the freedom to not get lost in every emotional wave, to not identify with every mental story, to not live enslaved by every memory that insists on telling you who you are. The witness consciousness rejects nothing, it welcomes. But in welcoming, it transcends. In practice, living from this place is to remember constantly that everything passes except the one who observes. Pain comes and is felt, but there is something that observes it passing. Fear screams and is heard, but there is something that remains in silence. The mind creates scenarios, doubts, criticisms, but there is something that simply watches without hurry, without effort. That something is you, not the you shaped by the world, not the you conditioned by the past, but the you that has always been behind, watching. How many times have you said, "I'm not that person anymore"? How many times have you looked back and realized you've changed? That perception is only possible because there is something in you that doesn't change, something that is present in every version you've ever inhabited. That perception is the foundation of spiritual awakening, because as long as you believe you are only the body, the mind, or the emotions, reality continues to be interpreted from separation, from lack, from defense. But when you begin to live from the witness consciousness, everything changes. Attention shifts from drama to presence, from the storyline to the space where it happens. And it is in this space that focus becomes free. Because now, instead of reacting, you can choose. Choose where to look, what to feed, what to release. From this silent center, focus is no longer pulled by lack, fear, or habit. It is guided by clarity. That clarity doesn't come from the mind. It comes from the silence between thoughts. It's when you stop seeking answers that they begin to arise, not as formulas, but as perception, as a wisdom that was already in you, but needed space to emerge. Practices of presence, such as meditation, contemplative silence, or even body awareness, serve as portals to this dimension. But the most important thing is not the technique. It is the remembering that you can observe, always, at any moment. Take a deep breath and return to the place from which everything can be seen, but nothing needs to be held on to. And it is from there that real transformation happens. Because when you anchor yourself in that place, you begin to see clearly what was once just reaction. You begin to perceive the patterns that govern your life. You begin to feel where focus needs to shift. And more importantly, you begin to truly trust the movement of life. Because the witness consciousness does not control. It allows. It trusts. It knows that the external reality is a reflection of the internal vibration, and that by changing the way you observe, the world responds, not by magic, but by resonance. Now that you've accessed this point of silence, the next step is to bring this consciousness into daily life. How to direct focus with intention, how to choose in practical terms, what to feed with your energy, and how to sustain this state of presence in the midst of real life, with its noise, its urgencies, its temptations to fall into old patterns. In the next section, we will explore exactly that, how to apply in everyday life simple and consistent practices that transform focus into a tool for conscious creation. Because knowing that you are the observer is the beginning. Using that power is where everything changes. Practical steps. Harnessing focus to transform reality. Transforming reality doesn't begin with big decisions. It begins with small realignments, with the simple and powerful act of noticing where your attention rests and making a different choice. Because what you focus on flourishes, and what you ignore withers. Life is always responding, not to what you say you want, but to what you feed with your daily energy. You may say you want peace, but if your focus is on what's wrong, on what's missing, on what hasn't been resolved yet, the vibration you emit is one of struggle, and the universe responds to that vibration. In the same way, you may say you want love, but if your focus is on absence, comparison, lack, the field around you echoes the frequency of scarcity. That's why changing reality begins with a shift in presence. Waking up and, before checking your phone, placing your hand on your chest and feeling your body. Being there, fully. Drinking water with awareness. Breathing with intention. Choosing a thought that resonates with your highest purpose and holding it even if just for a few seconds. That's not little, that's everything. Because every second of conscious focus is a seed planted in the quantum field. Throughout the day, the practice continues, not as artificial effort, but as a frequent return to your center. You notice when the mind starts chasing control, when the old pattern tries to take the wheel, when the same narrative wants to drag you back into the familiar. And instead of staying on autopilot, you stop, breathe, observe, choose. That choice doesn't need to be dramatic. Sometimes it's simply saying not now to a fear-based thought, or yes to a moment of silence when everything around you calls for urgency. It might be writing a sentence of gratitude in the middle of chaos, or placing your hand over your heart and remembering, I can come back to myself now. That's how transformation happens, from the inside out, moment by moment. Because the mind has been trained for years to focus on what hurts, on what's missing, on what threatens. And now you are retraining it. You are telling your biology there is a new path. You're opening new neural trails, new vibrational possibilities. You're stepping out of the victim role and claiming yourself as a co-creator of reality. Of course, there will be hard days, moments when everything in you will want to return to the old. That's part of it. It's not failure, it's cycle, it's repetition being exposed. And every time you choose, even in the middle of the fall, to hold focus on something more aligned, you're redrawing your timeline. You're collapsing in the field future versions that are higher, lighter, more coherent with your essence. And over time, something begins to happen. Reality silently changes tone. Situations that used to destabilize you lose their strength. People who vibrated with your old pain begin to drift away naturally. Synchronicities appear, doors open. You begin to live not by effort, but by resonance. But perhaps the deepest shift of all is the one that happens inside. You start to feel different with yourself. You begin to trust. You begin to respect yourself. You begin to hear your intuition more clearly. You begin to love your own company because you're living from a true place, a place where focus is no longer a tool of survival, but a beacon of creation. Focus is sustained presence, and presence is love in the form of attention. Every time you direct your focus with intention, whether to a thought, a choice, a breath, you are telling the universe, this is what I want to expand. And the universe, with its precise and impersonal language, responds, then it shall be. In the end, you don't need to control the world. You just need to take care of where your attention is, because it shapes your thoughts, it feeds your emotions, it defines your decisions, and step by step, it guides you through the reality you are creating yourself. Life doesn't demand perfection, it only asks for presence. And when that presence is cultivated with sincerity, with compassion, with consistency, it becomes living transformation, not only in you, but in everything around you. You don't need to wait any longer. The reality you desire is already available. It's only waiting for you to look at it with focus, with truth, with awareness. Because in the end, focus isn't just about what you see. It's about who you choose to be while seeing. And in this exact moment, you have that power to choose, to focus, to create. And maybe this is the moment when everything begins to change. We've reached the end of our journey, and maybe now you can more clearly feel what has always been present. Focus is more than a mental resource. It is a creative instrument. Everything you perceive, you feed. Everything you observe, you shape. And everything you sustain with attention becomes your reality. Today you understood that you are not a hostage to the world around you. You are the architect of how it touches you. The lens is in your hands. The collapse begins in your gaze. And freedom in the simple act of remembering, I can choose again. If this journey touched you at some deep point, leave a comment. I choose to focus on what sets me free. That way I'll know you made it to the end, and that something in you is ready to live reality from a new place. See you in the next video. Until then, return to your center as many times as needed.